Mr. Mathews, do you wish to present an opening
I
statement?
do, Your Honor. Thank you. May it please the court?
Yes.
Ms. Whaley, Mr. Finke, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, we finally have made it. We've been through this jury selection process. Now it's time to get to work. You all, 15, have been selected from a large group, and we've determined that you're the ones that are most suitable and qualified to sit on this jury and decide the issues at hand. As Judge Smith indicated to you, what I say in my opening statement and what Ms. Whaley just told you is not evidence. A lot of people refer to opening statements as opening arguments. In fact, that's a total misnomer. It's an opening statement. An argument is made at the close of the case after you've heard all the evidence, and we try to sum up what we think it has shown. The opening statement, as the judge indicated, is our opportunity to kind of provide you with a roadmap of where we expect the evidence to go. We've just spent, I'm not sure how long, listening to Ms. Whaley explain what she thinks the evidence will show. I could go on for another 2 hours filling in gaps that she did not present or providing you with further information. I'm not going to do that because the evidence that you're going to hear in this case is going to come from that witness stand and from any exhibits that are presented to you. You alone are going to decide what this case is all about. But just to begin with, ladies and gentlemen, the charge here is wanton endangerment in the first degree times 3. 3 counts, as Ms. Whaley just explained to you. The Commonwealth's position is, and you just heard Ms. Whaley tell you, that Brett Hankison was present at that scene and about everything he did was wrong and amounts to wanton endangerment. It adds up to wanton endangerment. The path that we are choosing is, well, first of all, the evidence is going to not be disputed too much by us with what Ms. Whaley just said. There's a lot more to fill in the gaps, but basically there's not going to be any dispute about the evidence. This is not a case of, hey, they've got the wrong guy sitting in here or somebody else did it. Brett Hankison is the one that's charged. He's the one that fired the shots that are the subject of this case. So that's not an issue. The issue is, what was the reasoning behind his firing those shots? Ms. Whaley indicates that his interaction with Mr. Sarpé up on the balcony that was up there, there was something wrong with that. She indicates that he couldn't have seen what was going on inside the door once it was breached. She doesn't know that. And you're going to hear, ladies and gentlemen, I assume from the witness, from the other, there were 7 total LMPD officers out there at Breonna Taylor's apartment to serve that search warrant. And you're going to hear from at least probably 5 of them, I think. I'm sure one is not going to testify. You're going to also hear from Brett Hankison when it's his turn. But through hearing from those officers, you're going to discover that this scene was total chaos and just unbelievable, chaotic situation, and they all have about the same recollection of what occurred, but everybody's got something different. And people don't know where each other were. So Ms. Whaley telling you definitively that Mr. Hankison was out of the picture and couldn't see in that hallway when that door was breached is not accurate. And you're going to be determining the facts, but Brett Hankison's going to tell you that when that door was breached, he had a straight shot in that hallway. He saw the muzzle flash from the gun that was fired at the officers as they breached that door. His perception of it was that it was an AR-15 rifle. Ms. Whaley said there was no AR-15 rifle in that apartment. I don't think there's going to be any evidence to establish one way or another whether there was. The evidence is going to be that once that shot was fired and the officers returned fire, the search warrant that they were there to execute to begin with was never served. The shots were fired. Breonna Taylor was killed. SWAT was called in to take over the scene after Brett Hankison successfully assisted in calling the shooter out of the apartment without any harm coming to him. Once SWAT arrived on the scene, they took over and they turned it over to the Public Integrity Unit, which conducted the investigation of the shooting. that nobody ended up serving the search warrant that the police were originally there to serve. So we don't know whether there was any contraband in that apartment and what kind of contraband there may have been. I believe the evidence will show that sometime later on March the 13th, in the day after this all occurred, the family was granted access to the apartment unaccompanied, and there's nobody knows what could have happened within that apartment. But you're going to hear from FBI agent Ziegler about some shell casings that he examined besides the shell casings recovered from what the police fired. And I believe that there could be some doubt about whether or not Detective Hankison could have in fact seen an AR rifle. In any event, ladies and gentlemen, be that as it may, no matter what the evidence shows, Detective Hankison returned fire, and you have to understand, I think everybody that was out there is going to tell you that this entire incident, after the knocking and announcing had occurred, and after the breach had occurred, the entire incident lasted from anywhere from 5 to 15 seconds. Nobody had a stopwatch and timed it exactly, but it was all instantly. Officer Mattingly was shot. He returned fire. Officer Cosgrove was next to him. He returned fire. And Brett Hankison slipped around the side, as you saw on the photograph that was up there, and he returned fire in the direction of where he had seen the original shot come from within the apartment. He was attempting to defend and save the lives of his brother officers who he thought were still caught in what they call the fatal funnel in that doorway. And what he saw was he was responding, number one, to the original shot, and he also will tell you that he saw muzzle flashes, which probably, as it turns out, were return fire from Cosgrove and Mattingly. But he was firing in the direction of that, as he was taught to do. You're taught to shoot until the threat is stopped. You're obligated under the operating procedures of the LMPD to defend yourself, your brother, sister officers, and citizens. And that's exactly what Brett Hankison was doing in this situation. And I think after you've heard all the evidence, rather than go down the path that Ms. Whaley wants you to go down and find him guilty of wanton endangerment 3 times over, you're going to go down the path that we suggest you go down and find that he was justified. His actions were reasonable and justified given the chaotic situation he was in. And we're going to hear from a number of officers, I believe, who are firearms instructors and range instructors, who are going to say that there are certain rules that you have to follow when you're discharging a weapon, whether you're a police officer or just a citizen who's out shooting. There are certain basic rules. We aren't going to dispute any of that. But the officers go through training, and I'll tell you one thing that none of these people are going to say is that they are trained under circumstances such as existed on March 13, 2020 in Breonna Taylor's apartment. And again, as I said during voir dire, this case is not about the death of Breonna Taylor, but in fact, it's totally about that, in a sense that that's what started this whole situation. We're concerned with the 3 occupants of apartment 3 who were not injured and were not even on the radar as far as Brett Hankison was concerned. Ms. Whaley told you about the briefing that the officers attended before they went out to Springfield, and I'm going to fill in. I don't want to get into great minutia detail, but there were 2 separate briefings. There was a number of search warrants that were going to be served that night, was the intention. SWAT was part of one briefing, and the officers who went out to Springfield were part of a different briefing. Nobody in the briefing that was held with reference to Springfield ever mentioned apartment 3 or the layout of the building. These officers went in there, had no idea what they were getting into, and part of the reason for that was that the other search warrants that were going to be served that night were for places that were well known to the police and well known to contain guns and drugs. Breonna Taylor was kind of a peripheral part of this whole deal, but she was tied into it, and they had a valid search warrant to go there, but it was determined, and it was issued, as Ms. Whaley said, as a no-knock warrant. That means they can just go up and ram that door and go inside. But somewhere along the line that night, it was determined that Breonna Taylor was not a threat to anybody. They didn't think she was a threat to anybody. It was thought that she was living alone. She didn't have kids. She didn't have animals. Nobody thought there would be any danger there. And so I think that somebody dropped the ball, and there wasn't as much preparation done in the search of her place, which is what led up to the shooting of Jon Mattingly, and ultimately to Detective Hankison firing his rounds through her apartment that went into apartment 3. All of that happened instantaneously all together. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, after you've heard all the evidence, you're going to determine that Brett Hankison was justified in what he did, and everything he did on that scene out there before, during, and after the shooting occurred was logical, was reasonable, was justified, and made total sense. So I would ask you to keep an open and clear, and pay close attention to this case and to the evidence, because that's what's going to come from that witness chair and from the exhibits, not what I've just said or not what Ms. Whaley said. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, why don't we take about a 15-minute break, and then we'll get started with the first witness. Please remember the separation admonition to not discuss the case with anyone, nor allow anyone to discuss the case with you. Don't form opinions, as you've not heard any of the evidence yet. We'll come back at 11 o'clock. Thank you.
All rise for the reporting jury. Mr. Lopez, face down in your chair.